The WNBA is buzzing right now, and not because of the usual highlight reel plays or superstar performances. No, this time it's because Lexie Hull, Indiana Fever's sharpshooting guard, decided to lift the veil and expose some jaw-dropping truths about Caitlin Clark.
Everybody does a little bit, and I think it's having that support system to...
The player everyone is already talking about. It's a revelation that is sending shockwaves through the basketball world. And if you think you've seen everything the Fever has to offer, trust me, you're about to be blown away. If you've been following the WNBA lately, you've probably heard of Caitlin Clark. The Iowa superstar is known for her electrifying three-point shooting and fearless presence on the court. Caitlin has been the epitome of coolness, unfazed by defenders, impossible to rattle, and playing with the kind of swagger that makes opponents second-guess their very existence on the court. She's a media darling and a fan favorite, and for good reason. Her game is transcendent.
Where you really felt like you found your role on this team, because it felt like the first 2 years you were trying to figure out exactly your place in the W.
Things are so up in the air that it's hard to know exactly where you fit.
But what about the person behind the game? What happens when the cameras are off and the spotlight fades away? Lexie Hull, Indiana Fever's breakout star, has spent enough time with Clark to see the player behind the legend. And it's safe to say that Hull's perspective on Clark is more than just admiration.
I've read some of my DMs that are hidden, and I refuse to read a lot of them because I know people are upset.
Who has been with the Fever for a few years, is now one of the most vital players in their transformation. But this wasn't always the case. There was a time when Hull was just another role player trying to find her place in a team full of questions and uncertainty. But now, Lexie Hull is playing like someone with nothing to lose, and she's done staying silent about what she's witnessed. It's not just about basketball. It's about revealing a truth that might surprise even the most dedicated WNBA fans.
And so you kind of forget that there's these people behind the scenes until they come out of the woodwork and say I've been following along this whole time.
This isn't a story of rivalry. It's a deep dive into the reality of the Fever's turnaround, fueled by a partnership between Hull and Clark, one that no one expected. And now, Hull's spilling the details that might just change the narrative about the league's most talked about player. The struggles before the storm, Indiana Fever's tough start.
After the season, all of our shots, threes going up, fans are out of their seats and expecting it to go in. So that just feels so good to feel the confidence from them.
Let's rewind a bit and take a look at where it all started. The Indiana Fever's 2023 season was anything but glamorous. The team kicked off their campaign in disarray, going 1-8 in their first 9 games for any professional team. That's a nightmare. For a team like the Fever, full of potential but struggling with consistency, it felt like the season was slipping away before it even truly began. Every loss was a bitter reminder that something wasn't clicking.
Following in the spotlight is great, and it's a huge deal for the WNBA and women's sports, but at the end of the...
Frustration was mounting, and players were starting to doubt if they even belonged in the league. There were whispers in the locker room, a sense of impending disaster that threatened to break the spirit of the entire team. But even in those dark times, there was a spark, something that kept them together. It wasn't just the strategy or the plays. It was the collective belief that they were better than their record showed.
Today, our job is to perform. We've seen just such a growth year after year. So, it's been so fun. The fans in Indiana have been amazing. So just excited to...
It was the support they had for each other, even when the odds were stacked against them. Lexie Hull would later describe the locker room as a place of emotional chaos, where players were mentally exhausted, questioning everything from their roles to the team's direction. But despite all of this, there was a quiet understanding among the players. They were going to rise above this, and they did.
That the start of the season isn't the biggest deal, it's how we finish and how we get better, and really proud of just the resiliency of the group.
That first win felt like a breakthrough. Slowly, the team started piecing things together. They weren't just surviving, they were beginning to believe in themselves again. And the change didn't just happen on the court. It happened in the locker room, where players started to rebuild their trust in each other. They had no choice but to stick together, to fight through the frustration, and that unity set the stage for the miracle comeback that no one saw coming.
Yeah, I think, she sees the game at a bigger scale, obviously with the platform that she's created for herself, and then that's transitioned to the game.
Then, the unthinkable happened. Caitlin Clark, a college basketball legend, declared for the WNBA draft, and the Fever, who had secured the no. One pick snagged her up like a prized possession. That moment changed everything for the Fever.
She's definitely going to say, like, you got the next one. Like, I can count on her for keeping me, like, confident and positive.
The sports world exploded with excitement, and for the first time in years, the Fever weren't just a footnote in the WNBA, they were headline news. Fans who had barely given the Fever a second thought were suddenly obsessed with their potential. Ticket sales skyrocketed, social media exploded with celebrations, and the Fever were no longer a joke, they were a powerhouse in the making. When Caitlin Clark walked into the Fever's facilities, it wasn't just a player joining the team, it was a full-on media spectacle. The fan base was buzzing, the anticipation was through the roof, and the atmosphere in the gym was electric. It was a Hollywood premiere, but for a basketball team.
Talked about a lot is it feels like she really imbues everybody with confidence as well. Like she just sort of has this way of thinking big about things.
For Lexie Hull, things started to change the moment Caitlin Clark stepped into that locker room. Hull had been struggling for years to find her rhythm in the WNBA. Her first 2 seasons had been filled with frustration, riding the bench, struggling to find her shot, and barely making an impact on the court. Her stats were dismal, and fans were beginning to wonder if Hull would ever live up to her college pedigree. But then something shifted. Caitlin Clark's arrival was like flipping a switch for Hull. Her presence, her intensity, and her unrelenting belief in herself began to have a profound effect on Hull. Clark didn't just play with confidence, she radiated it. Her competitiveness was contagious, and before long, Hull was playing like a completely different player.
You've been on the Fever for 3 years now, but this year, you go from a rebuilding team to now you guys are selling out arenas, you're a fan favorite.
She wasn't just hitting shots, she was dominating, and her confidence was at an all-time high. But what made Clark's impact even more profound was how she pushed everyone around her. Clark didn't just demand greatness from herself, she expected it from her teammates too. Practices became grueling, competitive affairs where no one could afford to slack off. Lexie Hull quickly realized that when Clark was around, every practice felt like a championship game.
The #1 pick, and once Caitlin declared, that kind of changed things, I think, for the city a little bit. People were just so excited to come support the Fever. We felt that.
There was no room for complacency. But what really set Clark apart wasn't just her basketball IQ or her skills, it was her infectious personality. Hull recalled how Clark could walk into a room full of stressed-out athletes and, within minutes, have everyone laughing. It was the kind of humor that put everyone at ease, but still reminded them that they were there to work. Even in the most intense moments, Clark made sure that the team was enjoying the process.
I mean, I think part of my role is just getting to the open spots, and we have such a good offense that people find the open person.
And that attitude transformed the Fever's entire approach to the game. The most memorable moment of Clark's time with the Fever might have come during one of the team's most grueling practices. Coach Christ Sides had turned up the volume on the speakers to simulate crowd noise, and it was deafening. Most of the players were just grinding through it, trying to focus on their drills. But then, out of nowhere, Caitlin Clark shouted, "Can someone turn it off? It's giving me a migraine." The room went dead silent.
The competitive aspect of it too, I think it's something you talked about in the past too, that she's just kind of raised the competitiveness level.
No one had ever spoken to Coach Sides like that before. Hull described how the entire team held its breath, waiting for an explosive reaction from the coach. But instead, when Clark repeated herself, the room erupted in laughter. It was unexpected, absurd, and the tension in the air completely evaporated. That moment became an instant legend in Fever history. It wasn't just funny.
Guard on the other team, hitting open shots, being where I need to be, spreading the floor. Those are things that I can bring to any team. So those are the things that I focus.
It was a reminder of how Clark had a way of breaking the ice and lightening the mood, even in the most high-pressure situations. As the season progressed, it became clear that Caitlin Clark wasn't just a player, she was a catalyst. Her energy was contagious, and it spread through the team like wildfire. Lexie Hull, who had once been a forgotten player, was now playing with the kind of confidence and skill that made her an essential part of the Fever's success. The way Hull played after Clark's arrival was proof of what can happen when a player's confidence is unlocked. And in Hull's case, it was nothing short of miraculous. Hull's transformation wasn't just a result of hard work, it was a direct reflection of the power of support and belief. Caitlin Clark's faith in her teammates was unwavering, and that belief gave Hull the strength to rise above her struggles. She wasn't just playing for herself anymore. She was playing for her team, for the fans, and for the belief that they could make something special happen together. Lexie Hull recalls the almost electrifying shift in morale and ambition when Clark joined the team. Hull, who had her own set of challenges in adapting to the WNBA, saw her career take a turn as well. In the past, Hull often felt like an outsider trying to find her place. She was a stellar college athlete with 2 NCAA titles to her name. But in the pros, things hadn't quite clicked, yet. Her stats reflected the struggle: low minutes on the court, poor shooting percentages, and the frustration of feeling like she hadn't lived up to her potential. Yet with Clark's arrival, Hull saw an opportunity for a fresh start. And that's exactly what she got. The impact wasn't only due to Clark's physical abilities on the court, but also her infectious enthusiasm and unwavering belief in the team. Hull describes Clark as a teammate who constantly lifted others up, whether by cracking jokes during tense moments or offering a quick word of encouragement after a missed shot. That positive energy transformed the way Hull and the rest of the Fever approached every game and practice. No longer was it just about going through the motions. There was a collective drive to improve, to compete, and, above all, to win. Clark's influence didn't stop at pep talks and humor, though. Her competitive fire was contagious, pushing every member of the team to step up their game. Practices became more intense, resembling championship-caliber sessions rather than routine drills. Every player felt the pressure to keep up with Clark's pace, and that expectation began to reshape the Fever's identity. Lexie Hull speaks of the near-military rigor that suddenly defined their training sessions. Players found themselves diving for loose balls, pushing harder on every sprint, and playing with a sense of urgency that hadn't been there before. Clark's presence, as Hull puts it, made everyone feel like they were competing on a bigger stage with a greater purpose. This intensity brought out the best in Hull, who began showing flashes of the dominant player she once was in college. The stats started to reflect her renewed focus and confidence. Her shooting improved, her minutes increased, and she started earning her spot on the court in ways that no one could ignore. Fans who once overlooked Hull as a bench player began cheering her name, recognizing her as an integral part of the team's newfound success. For Hull, it was more than just a comeback. It was a reminder of what's possible when you believe in yourself and when someone else believes in you too. The bond between Clark and Hull quickly evolved into a partnership that anchored the team's transformation. Their dynamic wasn't only about basketball. It was a testament to what can happen when two people share the same vision and push each other to achieve it. Hull describes Clark as a teammate who constantly challenged her to improve, but also encouraged her to embrace her unique style of play. Clark's presence reminded Hull that she didn't have to conform to anyone else's expectations. Instead, she could bring her strengths to the forefront and redefine her role within the team. In the Fever's locker room, the camaraderie between Clark and Hull became a source of inspiration for everyone else. Other players saw how Hull rose to Clark's challenge, and they too began to step up. A sense of unity replaced the initial doubts and frustrations that plagued the team at the start of the season. For the Fever, who were once on the brink of disarray, this newfound bond brought a stability and resilience that were essential to their turnaround. This isn't to say the road was easy. Hull recalls the rough early days, where the team's struggles seemed insurmountable. They suffered numerous losses, and doubts crept in at every turn. Yet through all the hardship, there was a shared understanding that they had each other's backs. This collective strength gave them the resolve to push forward, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. Hull's stories of those days paint a picture of a team that may have been down, but was never out. They found hope in each other and used that belief as a foundation to build upon